So small businesses say they are being hurt by the Chinese tariffs, and some could be forced to shut down.
And many businesses are being helped.
Are you considering tariff relief for small businesses?
Why do you always mention that, you pick up a couple of little businesses? What about the car business? They're going to make a fortune because of the tariffs. Do you know that the union, the head of the union, who was no fan of mine, Sean Fain, I guess his name is, right? He didn't endorse me. The Teamsters did. A lot of people did. A lot of unions did. But he didn't. He couldn't stand me. Now he's saying, wow, what Trump's done for the automobile, I can't believe it. I assume he's going to probably now say, the next thing he can say is, I endorse this guy. He's the greatest I've ever seen. He can't believe it's happened. He said, we've been waiting 40 years for somebody to do what Trump is doing. So why don't you mention the big car industry instead of mentioning somebody that's doing strollers?
Well, I'm just asking you about small businesses. Are there any discussions about giving any relief to small businesses?
They're not going to need it.
Okay.
They're going to make so much money.
Are these tariffs?
If you build your product here. Remember, there are no tariffs if you build your product here. It's very easy. It's very simple.
Now, this morning, another round of tariffs are in effect, this one on imported auto parts, and it could play a significant factor in the auto industry. Previous auto tariffs left U.S.-made cars mostly untouched. But with this new tariff in place, there's not a single U.S. car manufacturer that will get a pass. The CEO of General Motors told CNN the tariffs would cost the company between $4 billion and $5 billion this year. So what does this mean for car buyers? We may not see any price hikes in the short term. Experts estimate, though, the added cost of the tariffs eventually could average to about $4,000 per vehicle. But Trump doesn't seem worried about how these tariffs will affect the economy. He actually said it's okay if the country takes an economic downturn in the short term. CNN's Jeff Zeleny has more from the White House.
Omar, as President Trump spends a working weekend at his Mar-a-Lago resort in Florida, the economy remains front and center on the minds of the challenges of this White House, of this administration, even as the White House is releasing its budget blueprint, if you will, to slash spending across the government. The president was asked about the question of a recession by NBC's Kristen Welker.
Trump says the economy will be okay in the long term if there is a short-term recession. I mean, it's a great promise. It's a great prediction. No one would know until after it actually happened. But then again, no one would really know if we were in a recession until after it actually happened. And even then, would it be defined as such? I mean, we saw how just not too long ago, the definition of the term recession was changed to suit a specific narrative and purpose.
And that's my question.
Remember
the
this.
long term.
Yeah.
Is it okay in the short term to have a recession?
This. Look, everything's okay. What we are, I said, this is a transition period. I think we're going to do fantastically.
I don't know if you guys saw this. This was about a month ago.
Some experts are saying tomorrow, Monday, is going to be Black Monday. Like, market's going to drop. It's going to be nasty, and it may. So I got some unsolicited advice I want to share with you. Every one of my guys was frightened of what's about to happen. I stayed there. First thing I looked at was the following. In the history of America, I looked at every pandemic that took place, top 10, worst pandemic on how the market performed. And it shows, the collapse and all this other stuff, nasty. Out of 10 pandemics that we've had, 9 of them, whatever the drop was that was drastic, within 6 months, it recovers and goes above and beyond. The only one that it didn't recover for 18 months was the AIDS pandemic that we had. So what's the point here? When the market tanked, and it went to like 18,000 Dow, I don't know what it was, but some number like that, one of my good friends was so afraid of where the market was going to be going that he took 100% of his money out of his investments. We're talking 10 million goes down to 5 million. He takes the whole thing out. 3 months after he takes the whole thing out, everything goes back to normal price that it was before and beyond. But he lost $5 million. So what's the moral of the story?
But I'd have to say the moral to the story here is I wouldn't trust Kristen Welker. I wouldn't trust MSNBC. I wouldn't trust CNN. I wouldn't trust any of the mainstream media or the news. In fact, I'd probably be more likely to trust history. 9 out of 10, in fact, 10 out of 10, if you give it 18 months, recovers. But the media doesn't want you to know that. The left, Democrats, they don't want you to know that. They want you to live in fear. They want you to panic. They want you to despise and hate and regret President Trump for not only voting for him, but supporting him in this mandate to make America great again.
The president talking about a transition period, that is something he certainly did not talk about when he was running for office, when he promised to lower prices on day one. But there is no doubt about it. The president is simply trying to buy more time for the economy to get back up to speed, even as the administration tries to ink some type of a trade deal that so far has been elusive. Jeff Zeleny, CNN, the White House.
Interesting spin. But even as President Trump says himself, it's not so much about a trade deal. It's about America producing its own, being more self-sufficient and less reliant on foreign countries that are not our allies, that could kneecap and cripple us at any given point in time.
All right, Jeff, thank you. Joining me now is Republican strategist Brian Robinson and Democratic strategist Theron Johnson. Thank you both for being here. Brian, I'll start with you. Let's just pick up where Jeff left off there on the economy, because yesterday's jobs report was stronger than expected. Stock market has rallied, but consumer sentiment very low. Lowest level since May 2020. And then Trump tells NBC he would be okay if the economy slipped into a recession in the short term. I wonder what you make of the economic picture right now, and do you worry about it for Republicans?
And so we have here Brian Robinson, Republican strategist, and Theron Johnson, Democratic strategist. Just kind of curious, in the comments, let me know, are you familiar with these two or either one of them? Have you ever heard of, seen from them before? Just kind of curious. I'm not going to interject here. I'm not going to create any opinion or bias here, but I just kind of curious if you guys have ever, if they're familiar to you.
Well, there's still a lot of really good economic news. The headline on the top of the Wall Street Journal right now is economy remarkably resilient despite all these headwinds when it comes to tariffs and the uncertainty and instability that conversation is bringing. What Trump said about this may induce a short-term recession reminds us, Omar, that this guy plays by a different set of rules than almost any other elected official. And that authenticity is played to his benefit to a large degree. No one else would ever say, yeah, my policy may create a recession. But the strong, unwavering support of his base allows him to kind of go out on a limb like that. This is something he truly believes in. And when it comes to these tariffs, he believes that the issue isn't so much that Americans are going to pay more for cars, it's that Europeans and Chinese people and Japanese folks need to buy more American cars. We buy theirs, they should buy ours. It should be fair. And if that's where we can get you eventually, I think that's a huge win. I'm probably a dwindling member of the free trade Republican Party. You know, there's not many of us left. I understand.
I believe he's correct. I believe he's right. Because, I mean, we know beyond a shadow of a doubt that Rand Paul is no longer a part of that team. Besides the point, he is absolutely wholehearted, 100% correct in the fact that President Trump will tell you the truth. He will tell you the unpopular truth. He will go against the grain and say things that people may not necessarily want to hear, but it's what we need. It's not going to be sugar coated. He's not going to coddle you. He's not going to lie to you. He's going to tell you the truth. This has to be done. And this is why we're doing it. And if there's a short-term recession in the interim, it's going to be for the long-term benefit and good.
But if we can use this to get fair tariffs for our products, it's a win. I don't want to see long-term tariffs that will hurt American innovation and ingenuity. It'll make us less competitive.
And Theron, I want to pick up on that because, you know, for even some of the good economic indicators, there are a lot of economic headwinds, uncertainty around the tariffs, essentially ammo that one would think Democrats would have to sort of capitalize on. And I wonder, just from your perspective, What do you believe Democrats have the strongest case on against the Trump administration right now and the lead up to potentially the midterms?
Now, this is the part of the video where I'm a little bit confused and perplexed on how we went from discussing the possibility of a recession to Democratic strategy against Republicans and Trump leading up to the midterms. Why Theron Johnson got a completely different question than what Brian Robinson was asked is beyond me. But again, read the room. It's CNN.
Well, we got to tell the truth about this economy. And let's start with the tariffs. No matter how you try to spin it, these are inflationary tariffs. Every study, every economist that we talk to, and history has shown us in this country that you add on to inflation when you create tariffs.
Sorry, guys, butting in again. I asked Grok, are all tariffs inflationary? The answer may not shock you. Not all tariffs are inflationary, but they often lean that way. Tariffs raise the cost of imported goods, which can increase prices for consumers if domestic producers can't fill the gap cheaply or if demand remains sticky. This is especially true for widely used inputs like steel or electronics. However, the impact depends on context, market dynamics. If there's ample domestic supply or substitutes, price hikes may be minimal. Elasticity. If demand for the tariffed good is elastic, consumers might switch to alternatives, dampening inflation. Retaliation. Other countries counter tariffs can disrupt exports, potentially offsetting inflationary pressure by slowing economic activity. Scale and scope. Broad tariffs, for example, 10 to 20% on all imports, are more likely to stoke inflation than targeted ones. Economists like those at the Partisan Institute often cite studies showing tariffs under Trump from the year 2018 to 2019 raised U.S. consumer prices slightly, about 0.2 to 0.4% annually. Though effects varied by sector, in rare cases, tariffs can be deflationary if they crash demand or trigger a broader economic slowdown. Context is everything.
Donald Trump promised us that on day one or the first week, or at least in his first 100 days, he was going to tackle immigration and he was going to lower inflation. He's failed to do that.
But has he really, though?
I think there's no other way to look at this first 100 days other than a huge success. I mean, I know what you're talking about in terms of the polling and the approval rating, but look at the president's two top issues, immigration and inflation. Border crossings are down 99%. I spoke with President Trump on Sunday. He told me 3 people were apprehended at the border in the month of April, compared with 248,000 in the month last year, 1 year ago. That's the, migration and immigration story. Now let's take a look at inflation. You and I talked about eggs a long time ago. The price of eggs are down 50%. Look at where mortgage rates are down. Look at oil prices are down. So when you take a look at what President Trump said that he was going to do, it is a huge success in terms of these first 100 days.
If you really look at this report also, Omar, it talks about how job gains are really, really down. Layoffs are up. Small businesses and particularly big businesses should be very afraid because they've essentially been paralyzed.
Job gains are really, really down considering job gains beat expectation.
Breaking, of course, just moments ago, we got the latest read on the jobs market. 177,000 jobs were added in April. That's more than 40,000 more than what we expected. The unemployment rate remains unchanged at 4.2%. Joining me now is Labor Secretary Lori Chavez DeRemer. Madam Secretary, great to see you. Thank you for being here. Pretty good numbers. And, the markets, we had an analyst, Mike Lee, was just in saying it was kind of a Goldilocks number. It wasn't so spectacular that it would spook the Fed. And, of course, they have, I think, the wrong notion about a very strong economy going hand in hand with inflation. That doesn't necessarily happen. But that's why the market's taking it so well. It wasn't so spectacular that it would spook the Fed, but very strong numbers nonetheless. What do you make of it?
Well, absolutely. Here last month, we said we blew it out of the water, and we did. And with President Trump at the helm, I'm telling you, he mentioned to the American people over and over again that the golden age was coming. I will tell you the golden age is here. Exactly right. Again, this is another great jobs report, exactly what the market expected, better than expected. And I couldn't be more honored to serve under the president with these jobs numbers. And now as I continue on the road, we're going to keep pounding the pavement, and these numbers are going to continue to go up.
And the layoffs that are up are actually from the fake jobs that were created by the Biden administration from within the government. Right.
You know, good news for those of us who believe that the government's too big, that it needs to be shrunk, is that the federal government job numbers, the overall government job numbers, which includes state and local jobs, was up, but the federal government job numbers was down, as Lauren reported.
This guy says he's talking about the truth. He says we need to tell the truth. I guess that meant that they need to tell the truth. He's just not going to do it.
They can't make any bold predictions about how they're going to run their companies because you have a president who is telling us, hey, just waiting to see, trust in me for 2 years.
Well, first of all, Ford is really different. We make 80% in the U.S., more than any other manufacturer. In fact, we made 400,000 more vehicles than our next competitor, and that would fill up the entire island of Manhattan. That's how big of a gap we've made. So, look, we think this is really great for the country. We really support the president's initiative. We never left the America on car production, and so this moderation is reasonable, I think, for mostly our competitors. They need more time, but at Ford, we're in good shape. And this is the right thing to do. We really appreciate the dialogue we've had with the president, but we have a lot more work to do with him and the team.
I think the working class American, hardworking families in this country are worried. A lot of them are worried about their small businesses, many of whom have become entrepreneurs.
Let's be honest. Working class, small business, families, entrepreneurs, they're always worried. Doesn't matter who the president is. And then there's also some who aren't as worried. I mean, he's speaking in generalities here. He's trying to create this monolith for which it doesn't exist, but it purely just attempts to support his claim here that President Trump is actually going to do harm, and you have to wait 2 years to see, because he has no other argument really. And he wants to bank on people's fears of the unknown, but we already know what things could be like and what things have been like. So I'm going to roll the dice and see what happens in 2 years.
But big businesses right now are having to answer to their shareholders. And while the stock market did rally, we are seeing record low stock market activity. So those of us in this country right now, almost 70%, put our money in 401ks. We put our money in the stock market. And so now with that not being where it needs to be, I think that we as Democrats have got to tell the truth. And more importantly, go back to strengthening the middle class and working class families.
And if anybody wants to chime in here and let me know when the Democrats actually strengthen the middle class, I would love to share that with my entire YouTube audience and hope that that video goes viral, because I can't find that proof or evidence anywhere.
And Brian, you know, one of the things here that we also saw is the Trump administration put out their blueprint, their budget blueprint for their priorities here. And some of the priorities, just top lines, there's boosting defense spending, including boosted spending at the border, cutting programs, though, for education, foreign aid, health, and the environment. At least from someone like Senator Susan Collins, who's on the Senate Appropriations Committee, it does seem like there's not 100% of Republicans are fully on board. And I wonder for you, when you hear some of those priorities, are those priorities that concern you, excite you? Where do you feel? Where do you stand here?
Well, you're looking at hundreds or thousands of items. So everybody's going to find something in there that they don't want to see cut. Everybody's going to have something they hope to see further investment in. And we did get the word from Republicans on Capitol Hill immediately that the budget from the president, just like it is with every president, not just Donald Trump, is a suggestion that isn't taken too seriously by members of Congress. So that's very normal. But what I do appreciate as a Republican is somebody very concerned about our $30+ trillion debt. We do have to have fundamental change. We are going to have some tough decisions. We are going to have to cut some spending that we think is good, that we think is efficient spending, that is productive, because we're out of whack. and we cannot go on in this trajectory. I'm so happy that as we're discussing tax cuts and renewing them, which I think they'll do later this year, that we're pairing it with cost cuts. That is something we must do if we're going to be serious in this country about our economic fiscal dilemma. So, look, it's a serious conversation. I give him credit for starting the conversation, showing we got to change our ways.
And Theron, just on that front, look, we are seeing cuts to education, foreign aid, health, and the environment. It's also played out already in cuts we've seen in the federal government outside of just this blueprint. For the Democrats, I mean, where do you even begin to start to sort of say, look, the Republicans control all branches of government, essentially, at this point. So where do you even begin to start to sort of push back on some of these priorities that clearly the Trump administration has
Well, you got to hold them accountable.
And by hold them accountable, we mean we have to make up stories and lie to get our point across, or at least to try and persuade and continuously mislead the American public, or at least our dwindling percentage of voter base here that actually speak English, to believe that what President Trump has planned and is doing is to the detriment of Americans and, more importantly, seniors on Medicare.
You thinking about running for president or Senate?
Because of my Instagram post?
No, the video, the campaign style video. It's got everybody talking.
I mean, listen, it's a video, and frankly, I think what people should be most concerned about is the fact that Republicans are trying to cut Medicaid right now, and people's health care is in danger. And that's really what my central focus is. This moment isn't about campaigns or elections or about politics. It's about making sure people are protected.
And you got to also remember, Omar, that President Trump in his first term contributed to that $1 trillion debt that Brian just mentioned, more so than any other president. I mean, you talk about spending. I mean, he was massive spending. But the thing that worries me the most that Democrats are talking about are the cuts to education. Let's be specific. We're talking about almost $374 million being cut in K through 12. They're eliminating these preschool programs, many of whom these working families all across the country depend on. Also, if you look at the cuts to Medicaid and to Medicare, they're through CMS. They're trying to basically abolish Medicaid, and it's under attack, and Democrats are speaking out about that.
And I actually had this Newsweek article pulled up, Medicare update, what Trump's new budget request says about the program. Let's go through this together. Why don't we? The Trump administration's newly released fiscal year 2026 budget proposal calls for targeted cuts to Medicare and Medicaid operations. The administration said it will eliminate wasteful and woke initiatives while maintaining direct benefits to tens of millions of Americans. Why does this matter? More than 70 million people rely on Medicare and Medicaid for health coverage in the U.S. Democrats have long been raising concerns that President Trump's administration and Republicans will make cuts to these popular programs, but Trump has insisted he will not. And the administration has pledged to root out waste, fraud, and abuse of these programs, which it says will save money. According to budget requests released by the White House on Friday, and more of what to know, the administration aims to eliminate funding that had been used to carry out non-statutory, wasteful, and woke activities, and will end unnecessary DEI and support contracts. It also proposes cuts to programs focused on health equity and public outreach related to the Inflation Reduction Act, which passed in 2022 during the administration of former President Joe Biden. The White House emphasized that none of the proposed changes will reduce benefits to Medicare or Medicaid beneficiaries. And I think that it's important that we repeat and reread, and you guys hear that again. The White House emphasized that none of the proposed changes will reduce benefits to Medicare or Medicaid beneficiaries. Under the new budget, congressional committees would be tasked with identifying administrative savings within Medicaid and Medicare, totaling up to $880 billion in reductions over 10 years. The Trump administration says the savings will come from eliminating non-essential contracts and focusing agency resources on core health service functions. And this cut will have no impact on providing benefits to Medicare and Medicaid beneficiaries, the administration's budget says. Critics have raised concerns that such large budget reductions could eventually affect service delivery. Kevin Thompson, CEO of 9i Capital Group, said, "You cannot materially cut spending strictly through administrative tweaks. The cost is embedded within the system itself. Healthcare pricing, insurers, regulatory structures, all of it." At the same time, federal oversight of Medicare programs is ramping up in other ways, and the Department of Justice recently opened investigations into alleged kickbacks between Medicare Advantage brokers and insurers. Prosecutors are examining whether middlemen improperly steered seniors towards plans based on the incentives they received and not on patient needs. Now we can dive into what people are saying about this. House Speaker Mike Johnson, Louisiana Republican, says to CNN, the White House has made a commitment. The president said over and over and over, we're not going to touch Social Security, Medicare, or Medicaid. We've made the same commitment. Now that said, what we are going to do is go into those programs and carve out the fraud, waste, and abuse and find efficiencies. It's very important, folks. I would pay very close attention and be wary of anyone who opposes the idea that waste, fraud, and abuse cannot be cut. And also is so naive as to pretend to believe that there's no waste, fraud, and abuse in any system. Okay? Michael Ryan, a finance expert and the founder of MichaelRyanMoney.com, told Newsweek this is political sleight of hand, plain and simple. What they're calling woke activities and are actually programs designed to reach underserved communities. Why target health equity initiatives? Because they're easier to label as unnecessary than admitting to benefit cuts. The math doesn't work. You can't slash billions without consequences. It's like removing the foundation but promising the house won't collapse. Smile Insurance Group CEO Chris Fong told Newsweek the new budget and the statements made by Trump is counterintuitive to each other in actual practice. There are currently numerous examples of government benefits that are being underutilized because lack of knowledge and education that those benefits exist. Additionally, an argument can be made that this budget is discriminatory towards certain groups of U.S. citizens by making it much harder to know about and access these benefits. Alex Bean, a financial literacy instructor for the University of Tennessee at Martin, told Newsweek the new budget proposals do scale back from some of the bigger, broader cuts to Medicaid and Medicare that were originally proposed. Medicaid and Medicare are two of the most popular government programs, and there was a general belief that major cuts to them would trigger a backlash at the ballot box in future years. Still, it's hard to imagine the cuts to administration and recipient resources would be enough to add up to the lofty funding the budget hopes to save. The jury is still out as to whether the final budget will impact recipients and their coverage in any way. Odds are, I'm going to go out on a limb here and say that in the event that this is successful, the mission is accomplished, the media will still try and present and paint the picture that recipients are being harmed in some way. It does no good to the overall progress of this country and making America great again. It's purely just out of spite because they don't like President Donald Trump. Senator Bill Cassidy, a Louisiana Republican, says the president has said, for example, that he does not want to touch Medicare and Medicaid. He's saying, don't cut benefits to beneficiaries. Pretty simple and easy to understand, right? Again, Kevin Thompson, CEO of 9i Capital, he chimes in with, every time I hear the word woke used in a budget conversation, it hits like a dog whistle. Well, the old saying is, hit dogs holler, right? A term that once stood for awareness and justice has been twisted into a pejorative. That kind of rebranding, turning something powerful into something weaponized is frustrating, but not surprising. But I digress. Oh, you mean kind of like how the media continued to say that President Trump was a 34-time count convicted felon? Yeah, about that. So what happens next? The Trump administration's budget still needs approval from Congress, where Democrats are likely to push back against reductions to health equity initiatives and DEI programs. Meanwhile, lawmakers on both sides of the aisle are expected to closely scrutinize how the administration defines and implements wasteful or duplicative spending. Legislative debate over the final budget terms is expected to continue through the summer, but there's doubt on how the budget could actually be enacted without shrinking benefits. And when politicians say cuts won't affect services, check your wallet and your pulse, Ryan said.
And we also got to talk about these enhanced Affordable Care Act subsidies that many 24 million Americans right now are subject to lose if we don't extend these subsidies and make sure that these premiums that they could actually embody don't go up. But the bigger thing is that if you look at the polling, let's get back to this. President Trump is the lowest that he's ever been. He's the lowest of any current president in his 400 days and in 7 decades. And so he had a very low approval rating early on in his 2016 presidency. So the American people are very fed up. They don't like the way that the Republicans are leading this country. They are waiting for Democrats to continue to be more bold. And really, if you look at what Leader Hakeem Jeffries and others have been doing, Senator Cory Booker.
I don't know if I'd go as so far as to say Hakeem Jeffries is a leader. I mean, maybe the leader of the Mongoloids.
Chairman Hakeem Jeffries, has done talking to working class people on the steps of Washington, hearing their stories, letting them give feedback, showing that they care. Those are the kind of kitchen table, sort of very succinct primary issues that we're going to focus on.
I got to leave it there. Gentlemen, really appreciate you coming in on a early Saturday morning, whatever day it is today. Thanks for being here.
Thanks, Omar. Thank you.
So let me just ask you this question, and this will be it for this video. Do you want Hakeem Jeffries and Cory Booker sitting on the steps of the Capitol, telling stories around a campfire, proverbially speaking, just to listen and to hear what people have to say about the issues and complaints and gripes they have? Or would you prefer President Donald J. Trump and the Trump administration and the Trump cabinet actually doing something to get things done, to fix the problems and create solutions and solve the issues that people are sitting there telling Cory Booker and Hakeem Jeffries about? I know which one I prefer.